Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about 15 minutes. Stay tuned. We're going to have the DTO team today to talk about modeling and simulation and digital transformation. It's going to be fun. If you want to move at the pace of relevance, you want to understand how to adopt digital twin capabilities in your hardware/software systems. This is the perfect time to talk about this. If you have questions, put it into the comment section below. Start with a Q so we know it's a question. If you want to share you here, just put your name and company. We'll be able to highlight you as well. Stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 15 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes. We're going to talk about digital transformation and how to move at the pace of relevance with digital twin capabilities and how to innovate in a world of hardware and software. We're going to have the DTO, Digital Transformation Office team today with us, and we'll be taking your questions live. So make sure you put it into the comment section below with your questions starting with a Q. And if you want to share you here with us today, put your name and company on the comment section so we can also highlight you on the screen. Stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, even good evening, and good night, apparently, to some people following us in Japan, joining us today at 2 a.m. in the morning. So, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. We're going to be talking about digital transformation today and how to move at the pace of relevance with the Air Force and Space Force Digital Transformation Office, DTO. We're going to have two amazing guests, and we'll be taking your questions live. So make sure you put your questions in the comment section below. Start with a Q. And if you want to share you here, like Keith today, you want to share your company and who you're with, we'll be able to highlight you on the screen. Also wanted to remind everybody to join and register to get the email notifications of this show at the inthenickofTime.tv. InthenickofTime.tv. You're going to be able to register. That's a new domain we got for the show. Also, next week on Tuesday, 1 p.m., we're going to get General John Olsen, the first Chief Data and AI Officer of the Air Force and Space Force. And we'll be able to have him for an hour. So make sure you prepare your questions so we can have him answer as many questions as we can during 1 hour next week on Tuesday, 1 p.m. So stay tuned. We're going to get started here today in about 6 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have people joining from all over the world. It's pretty exciting to see. Thanks for being here. We're going to be starting in about 5 minutes. We'll be talking about digital transformation, digital twin, how to move at a pace of relevance in the world of hardware and software. Very interesting discussion with modeling and simulation at the forefront of everything, and open architecture and many other things. So stay tuned. We're going to get started with the DTO team in about 4 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking today about modeling and simulation, digital twin, and how to move at the pace of relevance when it comes to hardware, software, and what that brings to you and your team in terms of velocity gain, and why this is a must in a world of digital transformation. Stay tuned. We get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalon. I apologize for my voice. I'm a little sick and nothing big, just a little cold. So I won't be dying anytime soon. I'm sorry. But stay tuned. We're starting now this new episode of In the Nick of Time with the Digital Transformation Office of the Air Force and Space Force. And we'll be talking about digital transformation, digital twin, how to move at the pace of relevance when it comes to hardware plus software. How do you decouple the two, and how do you innovate in a world where time is of the essence? First, I wanted to remind everybody to register for the show at inthenickofTime.tv. You can go and put your email. We'll send you reminders of the show next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. We're going to get Gerald John Olsen, the Air Force and Space Force, so Chief Data and AI Officer of the Air Force and Space Force, the first, since we just added the AI title inside of that role. So John will be joining us only for 1 hour. So make sure you have your questions ready, because that's going to go fast. Also, if you want to watch on YouTube, apparently LinkedIn is always struggling with the streaming, and it's a little bit behind. So if that's easier to try on YouTube, let us know if that works better. But apparently sometimes we have a few issues. So let us know in the comment section below also if that's working better for you guys. Also wanted to share a couple of thoughts when it comes to digital transformation, and really wanted to show people, if they missed it in the last year, some of the publications that Dr. Roper put together before leaving the Air Force and Space Force. And the first one is There's No Spoon, and the second one is Bending the Spoon, really leading the way and showing how to innovate when it comes to digital transformation with the digital trinity, with open architecture, DevSecOps, and digital engineering. And that's so important to be able to move fast. So if you did not have the chance to read those two publications, make sure you do that, because they are pretty game changing, and they go deep enough to give you a lot of insights as far as how to execute it, but it's also broad enough to enable that scale and that diversity of opinions and flexibility as well. So that's kind of the perfect recipe for broad, well thought designs and architecture. So pay attention to that if you missed it. Also, wanted to give you a couple of examples before we get started, bringing Kyle and John here with us today. Wanted to give you the example of SpaceX versus F-35. And SpaceX has 9 vehicles. F-35 has one with several variants. SpaceX has 200 developers. F-35 has 4,000. Effectively, we see about a 50% defect rate of on the coder side on F-35. So effectively, 2,000 of those developers are pretty much useless. So you can also see the reuse of code between F-35 and F-22s. Only 4% actually reused between the F-35 and F-22s. And then if you compare that with SpaceX, being very modular and flexible, SpaceX has 80% of the code reused across the 9 platforms, makes it very modular and flexible. And they can update the software the day before the launch versus a 1 to 7 year ready average on F-35. They can do 17,000 build of software a day on F-35 on SpaceX, not capable of that on F-35. And more importantly, they have a hardware loop testing capability of 3 times a day. So that's what's enable the update of software the day before the launch. And everything is modular and flexible with SpaceX, with containers and reuse of those containers. So that's very flexible as well. So that gives you a lot of insight when it comes to the importance of your tech stack and the enabler that is DevSecOps and digital transformation. If obviously SpaceX did not have such flexibility, they would not be able to update software the day before the launch. So that can obviously be a game changer enabler when it comes to innovation. So now, in 2019, we demonstrated that in 45 days we could put Kubernetes and Istio on F-16 jets, and that was fun and well. But in 2020 and 2021, we made it the default for new programs, but also we took the U2 platform, which is 60 years old, and we were able to put Kubernetes and Istio on the jet, deploy the platform one stack on the jet in 12 days, flew the jet with Kubernetes and Istio on it. But more importantly, we had AI machine learning containers to automate the management of the sensors so the pilot can do something else. And we're able to demonstrate that we can receive over-the-air update while flying the jet with no impact to the airworthiness of the aircraft. That's obviously a game-changing capability that was demonstrated all in 12 days with a legacy jet that's 60 plus years old. So if we can do this on the U2 jet, you can pretty much do it anywhere else. So that's a good example of a great success story as well. Now, I'm pretty excited to introduce you to Kyle and John, and I'm going to bring them up on the screen. So Kyle and John, welcome on the show. Good to have you, and thanks so much for taking the time to share with us a little bit of your story. I'm going to give a quick intro first on Kyle, who is the chief of the Digital Transformation Office, a new organization that was tasked to coordinate and facilitate digital transformation for the Air Force and Space Force acquisition and sustainment enterprise. With small little thing that you can do on the side, right? Pretty easy. You can do that in your sleep.
Simple.
And the DTO's vision, right, is to create this digitally empowered DAF equipped with an agile workforce, state-of-the-art technology, intuitive processes that drive model-based enterprise decision-making and enable automation, open architecture, and leverage models and the data, right, to be able to seamlessly integrate the stakeholder and collaboration across the acquisition lifecycle. And of course, before your time at the DTO, you were at the Pentagon working budget oversight and open architecture standardization, engineering policy, and you spent time in acquisition program offices, which is always useful for what you're doing now. So you've seen a lot of the mistakes probably being made back then, and now you can help fix those. And we also have Captain John McCrea, the digital sustainment lead for the DAF Digital Transformation Office. In your role, John, you aim to pioneer and advocate for digital sustainment, digital thread, and digital twin initiatives across the air and space forces. And of course, you were also part of early acquisition programs and sustainment programs to start to realize the importance of all this. You spent time on the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, tackling the MBSC engineering and the product lifecycle management and digital engineering as a service to be able to support the massive and probably one of the most important program on the planet. We won't be able to talk about that too much today, but the GBSD program and Minuteman 3 program offices, and that's we're so thankful to you for helping the nation have the right deterrent when it comes to GBSD and Minuteman 3. So if people want to follow you, of course, you're both on LinkedIn, but there's also the DAF DTO LinkedIn page. And if they want to connect with you guys, there's this dafdto.com domain here for people to check it out. But first, before we do that, and people go check out what you've been doing, I wanted to kind of talk to Kyle first and get a little bit of I obviously gave a little bit of quick rundown on who you are, but I'd love to get it from your standpoint and what you wish you could accomplish in your time in the new DTO's office.
Yep, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having us. Really appreciate the time to talk here. So a little bit about my kind of background. So I think you gave a pretty good overview on where I've been before. My intro into the government wasn't probably as exciting as some of the other guests you've had on the show. I kind of grew up around Air Force Base. My dad was a civilian since before I was born, so it was kind of always there, very familiar. Got out of school and kind of I was the rebel in the family. I decided not to do the electronic engineering, EW, black magic stuff that my dad and sister and the rest of them do. So I went aerospace and said, I'm going to go into the core of acquisition. It's cool that you guys do your operational EW reprogramming stuff. It's black magic, but I'm going to go. I'm going to go into the core acquisition activities. And so I started off in test, spent some time in a few different test organizations, everything from weapons to OFP roles on on some of our fighters, gunships, and then spent time in a couple program offices, and then spent time in the Pentagon. So kind of rapidly jumped through a bunch of different organizations early in my career and spent time in a lot of different places. And so it gave me a real insight into both the amazing capabilities we have across the Department of the Air Force and the acquisition world, but also some of the just incredibly difficult and arduous things we have to jump through, and the massive amounts of areas where we can improve the way we do business. And so that's really like where my passion for this subject kind of got lit, is just bouncing through 5 or 10 different organizations, offices, where it's just like we are doing things in incredibly archaic manners that we could definitely improve the way we do business. And so that's kind of how I got here today. And so really hoping we can make an impact kind of, again, on the acquisition system enterprise and really modernize the way we do work.
Yeah, and you're already making an impact, so that's just the beginning. But I can already feel it, so it's in the air. So I guess same question to you, John, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of your background. And like I said, I wanted to thank you for all the work you've been doing, and obviously a pretty large team at GBSD and Minuteman 3, but for people that don't know, you should Google it, and you're going to realize this is probably why the United States is very safe right now, thanks to people like you waking up every morning to keep us that way. So,
no, absolutely. I like Kyle, I've had a chance to jump between a lot of different parts of programs. Most of my time has been with the Nuke Weapons Center, but it has also, like you were saying, been on both sides of the house, been on the acquisition side as well as on the sustainment side. When I started on GBSD, it was very early in the life cycle, and really that gave me an opportunity to dip my hands in a lot of different places, just because the team was a lot smaller. Really embraced a lot of the model-based systems engineering at that time, working with Minuteman 3 later in the life cycle. Totally different animal in terms of the actual types of things that will give you ROI. You've already got a system in the field. You already have a system that you're trying to sustain, you're trying to keep alive. So it's a different calculus in terms of what is the return on investment for your activities in a way that I hadn't appreciated prior to doing that I think really opened my eyes to a lot of the opportunities there. But like I said, model-based systems engineering earlier in the life cycle, product lifecycle management later in the life cycle, pursuing digital twins using analysis and other types of system and engineering and analysis tools, like Kyle said, to just really do things better, get a better understanding of the types of systems we're trying to field, the issues we're having with fielded systems, and really keep our systems going longer, going stronger. And that is really what my goal is, as well as trying to just reduce that barrier to entry and helping programs to understand wherever they are in the life cycle, there is value. It's just it changes depending where you are in the life cycle, and you got to think through that. And so I think that's really where I try to plug in.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a little bit today about does this apply to every program? What about sustainment programs? I believe it applies to everybody, and I think you do too. But we'll talk more about that today as well. And I wanted to remind everybody, if you have questions, make sure you start with a Q, so we know it's a question. I already have a couple of questions on the chat here, but if you just chatting, that's fine. But if you want to ask a question to the group, start with a Q, so we know it's a question. All right, so let's talk first about, and Cal, maybe you can give us a quick rundown of the DAF Digital Transformation Office. When was this created, and kind of what's the main objective of the office?
Absolutely. So I'm really glad you kicked it off with kind of the bending the spoon, there is no spoon document. So those are definitely like the vision, right? The long-term vision that our previous acquisition executive. So there's obviously been a bit of a change of the guard, moving from the last administration to this administration. But the principles, the vision, the concepts outlaid in those two documents are definitely still completely applicable, and something the Air Force is trying to march towards and figure out. And I'd go the level higher, right? The Chief Brown, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, laid out a accelerate, change, or lose document, right? And within that strategy, he was very explicit. It wasn't just, we need to accelerate how we change operations or training. Like he name dropped acquisition a few times within that. And so we kind of latched on that. That's the part that we want to be the accelerating of change for the acquisition and sustainment enterprise. And so as that document came out, the Space Force similarly rolled out a vision for a digital future or digital service. Very similar kind of echoes within that document, saying, hey, we need to really modernize and change the way we do acquisition to acquire our weapon systems. So the Air Force has been talking about this for a little while. Our office was stood up kind of almost a couple of actions out of those documents to say, hey, how do we actually go do that? We need to get some innovation rolled into our enterprise. So the Chief of Staff pushed really hard to get a lot of innovation positions distributed out into the workforce. I think I showed my bio. I was right before this. I was up at the Pentagon, and I was doing some of this stuff at the Pentagon as they established some new innovation positions that were going to go out into the workforce. They said, we're not going to put you in the Pentagon, though. So these new innovations are not going to be a bunch of policy wonks thinking about problems, admiring strategies, and talking about stuff. You need to be out there actually doing, executing, trying to drive change from the grassroots. So they stood up the Digital Transformation Office. They had to put us somewhere, so they dropped us in AFMC. At the headquarters, Air Force Materiel Command headquarters, and said, but that's you're not just going to be Air Force, you're not just going to be engineering. Go do digital transformation for the entirety of the acquisition enterprise for both Air Force and Space Force. So we organizationally have a bit of a challenge we have to work through, but we're still definitely that's our scope. That's who we are, where we sit. We're a small office, and so we fully understand we're not going to digitally transform the entirety of the process, and so there's tons of efforts out there already between programs, different organizations that have already been moving the ball. I like to kind of spotlight some of the test community has been doing M&S kind of stuff, hardware, software in the loop testing. A lot of those kinds of things are already digital transformation. And so there's definitely pockets and silos of this stuff across the acquisition enterprise. Our office was kind of stood up to say, hey, we need to proliferate that. How to figure out how do we scale those successes? How do we create a digital thread from early research all the way to and through sustainment, so that we can continue to grow these kind of activities across the enterprise. That's kind of the scope and goal of our office and where we sit.
Yeah, very exciting. And I guess I have a couple of questions for you, so we're going to take them now because they're really about you. And I guess you got a lot of people excited. Andrew was asking, hey, what's your job series? Doesn't sound like the typical 1101. So
yeah, great question. So we are I kind of joke that they gave us the scope of go digitally transform all of acquisition. And then when they said, hey, here's your job offer and here's the office you're going to have, it was 11 engineers and 1 program manager. So it's like, okay, but we can get around that. And so we've done a really good job, we think, of so I'm an 801 general engineer. We've got a handful of other engineers and 1 program manager on the team. Luckily, our program manager has a very strong background in contracting, so he's very fluent in the kind of the multiple sides of the business side of the house. And we've got some engineers like John, who's very fluent in the kind of logistics and sustainment realm. And we think we've done a pretty good job of trying to make sure we have kind of key focal points representatives within all of the different functional communities to say, hey, we acknowledge we're not the experts in a lot of those areas. Come help us figure it out, right? So we're herding some cats, we're driving the ship forward in some directions, but we're definitely relying on a lot of other organizations to help us do it.
All right. There was another question also. We're going to take it now because it's very related to you and what's behind you on the wall. People are asking what's on the wall behind you.
So this is actually, I'm at Wright Brothers Institute, at downtown Dayton. So every once in a while, technology, old problem, whatever the other one is.
Every once in a while, new technology.
All come together for an innovation.
Here we go.
Nice little inspirational quote. We actually, we have some fun with some of our graphics and messaging. If I would have had a different background, it would be, we have these things called semiotics that we do. It's almost like a little cartoonish graphic. That's it can be a smack in the face, a little controversial on some of them, or it could be just an impactful message to try to go harder. So we use those all the time, but this is a fun one too.
All right, last question for now. How many resources are under the DTO's office, and is it good enough? I'll answer the last piece. Probably not good enough for you, but tell us what you got.
Yep, absolutely. So we've got 12 people as far as individuals. I will say the one thing we have in spades is access to leadership. It's another one. I kind of joke about it. I end up talking to generals and SESs way more often than I want because of the prep work involved. But we have lots of access to and to be pretty non-attribution, right? We get to tell leadership, hey, here's how it is, and we don't really get told. We don't have to put on the veil that a lot of acquisition programs would have to say, hey, we're still making progress, we're doing great things, trust us, it's going to be great. We don't always have to use the rose-colored glasses that a lot of groups that go talk to the bosses have to go do. So we have tons of access to leadership, which is valuable. Our office did only stand up in June officially, so there's no budget yet. We're working through that POM process to get budgeting, which I'll probably get on a soapbox later to talk about. Generally, POMing and budgeting and how we do things is pretty difficult. But so that's pretty much the summary of our resources, which fiscally is.
Are they civilians, bidets, military, both, or contractors too, or just bidets, government bidets?
The 12 billets are all military. We have guys like John on the team as well that are kind of matrix support, and then we've got a few support contractors. So in all, it's probably closer to 15. And I'll touch on it a little later, but we also have this thing within the Air Force, the digital campaign, that's kind of there's hundreds of people actively involved day in and day out on trying to drive different pieces and parts of this forward. So I will say we also have a huge amount of kind of coalition of the willing volunteer support spread across different centers, different program offices, helping try to move the ball forward in different areas. So lots of people support, lots of passion. Most of the fiscal kind of financial resources we have are kind of buried within programs driving the ball forward for a specific program that we're trying to kind of pull out the lessons learned, scale with the products they're developing to help be useful across the enterprise.
Yeah, and I guess I lied. I have one last question. A lot of people were asking, Rich Tampalsky, the Chief Modeling and Simulation Officer that Dr. Roper appointed a little bit after me. What's his role into all of this? Does he have an engagement with you guys? How does this work, I guess?
Yep, absolutely. So we actually meet with Arla Salomon, who's his kind of deputy. We meet with her every week. And so we got a weekly battle rhythm with her and the SIMSO team, Chief M&S Officer team. So tons of overlap, obviously. I think the scopes are a little different. And the only reason I say that is organizationally, as Secretary Kendall came in, right, he took a very, very keen interest in how do we go model, how do we understand what decisions we're going to make. And M&S is a key part of that. And so there's, in the building, kind of whole reorganization discussions around where should that organization sit. And so part of what is in kind of his broader, I would say his portfolio is larger. It includes things like M&S training, right? How do we train our fighters, our operators, and then kind of the wargaming and analysis stuff. And I would kind of put that, while we have to tie into the wargaming and analysis to figure out what systems do we need, our scope is kind of more firmly in the acquisition sustainment research to sustainment retirement. So our scope is kind of core to acquisition, whereas the SIMSO team, I think, is a little broader. They look at both. The acquisition is definitely a huge part of the M&S ecosystem, as well as operator training, and then kind of the operational analysis wargaming.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I get my next question is for John here, and wondering about, obviously digital transformation means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. I wonder if you even agree between each other what that means, but maybe you can tell us what it means to you and the DTO.
I'll tell you right now, we don't all agree with each other, and I don't think that that's a problem. I mean, we all rally behind really the vision that Kyle has set for us, and I think that brings us all on the same page. But bits and pieces of digital transformation and more of the specifics, we start to diverge a little bit. But I think that that's healthy to have a good amount of conflict to make sure that we're each challenging each other's thoughts. I mean, for me, I think that digital transformation really is, as Kyle alluded to earlier, doing things more intelligently with a better suite of tools to make better decisions. I like to say getting people the right data at the right time to make the right decisions in support of our warfighter. And so when I mentioned right at the beginning there, it's all about data. We have a lot of various efforts across the DoD. We just referenced the Chief Modeling and Simulation Office as well. And so across the Air Force, we are trying to figure out how do we do things better with the data that we have? How do we know that of the data we currently have, that a lot of it is not necessarily the best quality of data. So how do we take measures to clean up that data so that moving forward together, it is a more rich and healthy data set that we can do something with. So I think in terms of the DTO's role in that, a lot of it, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, is all around our 5 focus areas that are kind of an evolution of the digital campaign, but also really just in layman's terms, lowering the barrier to entry for organizations across the Air Force and Space Force to move to a more digital posture and really figuring out what is the return on investment depending on where I am in my acquisition lifecycle. If I'm really early, I got to focus on certain things. I've got to bake some language into my contracts, and we want to help programs figure out what that looks like. Okay, I'm further and I've already got a fielded system. So, okay, you've already got your data, you've already got a bill of materials, you've already got systems out in the field working with the depot, working with maintainers. It's a different enterprise. It's a larger enterprise in a lot of respects. How do we shift our focus? So digital transformation doesn't just mean different things to different people, but it also means different things depending where you are in your program.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll talk a little bit more about, why people think sometimes this is not something they can use at all because of their technical debt or the state of their existing work. So we'll talk about that as well. All right. So next question will be, and I'm going to move you up. Here we go. Next question will be for you now about, obviously, Kyle, the Air Force has been kind of talking about this for a very long time. What's the journey been like, and do you feel like things are really progressing, or is it more talk and less of walking the talk?
Yep, no, great question. So going back to kind of the Air Force with the visionary document, spinning the spoon, there is no spoon, accelerate change, right? There's lots of strategic discussions out there, plenty of talking about the problem, showing what the problem is, and I think it's pretty simple, right? When you take a step back and say, okay, what does acquisition do? What's our job, right? And it's like the military loves to talk about OODA loops and stuff, right? And so we big picture, what's our strategic OODA loop, right? We observe what the bad guys are doing. We kind of figure out where we think they're going to go. We orient ourselves by doing maybe some kind of force posture, war gaming analysis, figure out what systems do we think we need to buy in the next couple of decades, whatever future force we need to have. We decide Maybe that's the requirements process, the budgeting process. We get kind of our stuff, all of our ducks in a row to go buy something. And then the act is the acquisition process. And so I like to kind of characterize it of that act is really, really slow, right? It takes decades to develop a warfighting capability. And so I kind of connect the dots with that accelerate, change, or lose vision. And I'm going to tell a lot of stories today because I like stories. So the accelerate, change, or lose strategy is all future tense. We need to accelerate this. We need to accelerate that. We need to go faster here. And then there's actually a congressional report out there, fully publicly shown that we were kind of assessing China's warfighting capability and their development of their military capabilities. And it uses the word acceleration or some derivative of that word 29 times. 20 of them were they've already done this, they've already done that. And then the other 7 or the other 9 were all future tense. They have a strategy to accelerate that. So it really lays the kind of foundational concept of we have to find a way to go faster because we know we're not. We know we are trending on a slower direction, and our peers that we're still kind of posturing to chase are actively accelerating. So beyond that, right, the Air Force has realized this, and so I think we have a great strategic foundation that's been laid out by leadership, and then I think we have a shocking amount of passion and kind of commitment across the Air Force and Space Force to try to get after this, whether it's within program offices or as a coalition of the willing. So in 2019. The strategy started getting laid in place. In March of 2020, Air Force Materiel Command kicked off a digital campaign to figure out how do we go tackle this from a AFMC perspective. Over the next 3 to 6 months, that quickly kind of scaled to be acquisition and sustainment all. Dr. Roper very smartly came in and said, hey, we got to make sure this is a DAF activity, scale it for both the Air Force and Space Force, share what you're doing, right? Maybe make this a enterprise-wide capability. And so we've been working through this, in the construct of this digital campaign. There's been 6 lines of effort. It's IT infrastructure, access to tools, standards and architecture, acquisition processes, policy and guidance, and then training. So we kind of laid out those 6 key reasonably broad activities that the Air Force was going to go get after. One of the things I think has been impressive is the level of involvement of both practitioners that are out there in the community as well as SCS general level champions to kind of shepherd and continue support for those offices. So again, lots of leadership visibility in this. Every one of those LOEs had a SCS or general level person that was on a weekly, if not daily basis, engaged in helping drive the ship forward in those areas. So tons of good involvement and activities. And I think the establishment of an office with our team to help shepherd it forward, create kind of that permanent presence to make sure we don't lose any momentum. We can just build off of it and keep moving forward. There's lots of hurdles that I'm sure we'll get into later, to get around it, like the budgeting process, traditional organizational in program offices in specific silos of excellence, islands of excellence. How do we scale the lessons learned? How do we scale the good stuff that we know is already happening? So it's a bit of both. There's definitely a lot of admiring the problems that are out there, and at the same time, there's lots of tactical great things going on. It's our office's job and our team's job to kind of figure out how do we bubble those up and scale them out so that those can be enterprise lessons learned, enterprise enablers.
Yeah, so we got a few questions that are relevant to what you've been talking about. We're getting a lot of questions, by the way, so let's try to answer as many as we can. The first one I'm going to bring up here is from Robert. He was asking what are the most effective ways for industry to interface and collaborate with you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're go to the website and definitely connect with dafdto.com. Go there and connect with us. We're going to have we're still kind of figuring out exactly when and how we're going to execute these, but we're going to have some external engagements, and so we'll kind of do some formal reaching out through the list we get from that activity. We've done lots of pitch days, kind of things for the small business side. How do we kind of leverage innovative small companies? We've done some small business innovative research activities. And we've done a handful of activities with the National Defense Industrial Association, some of the different major conferences to go say, hey, this is our vision. This is what we're doing. How do we go back and forth with industry? We've done a couple of RFIs just to say, hey, these are some of the activities we're working on, especially when we get into some of the open architectures, the kind of contract delivered data that we're thinking about trying to go, shift from the paper-based data item descriptions to more digital-based stuff. We've done a couple of RFIs to say, hey, how to industry, how does this look if we start going this direction? So all of those are great ways. And then I think we're always open to having discussions with different industry groups and just kind of, diving deeper on, hey, this is what we think we're doing. Always welcome to feedback.
Yeah, and the campaign as well hosts weekly or up to weekly sessions where they allow different industry partners to come in and pitch their service, their product, whatever. And I think that's one extra way in which you can interface, because we are still well plugged in with all those efforts.
All right. Now there's another question which is interesting from Andrew. You talk a lot about acquisition, of course, which includes a variety of people. You would think, and probably me too, maybe you have it, but what do you think of having a contracting person in your group?
Yeah, so would love one, and would also love a budget that we could actually put things on contract and go execute. So that's kind of a separate discussion. But I will say there's lots great championing of this whole activity, whole concept by General Holt up at SAF AQC. So he's been a firm believer in a lot of this stuff. He's produced documents or strategies to say, hey, this is how we as a contracting community need to go. AFMC, I think, has always also been pretty forward leaning. And I can make some connections if you're interested in talking to some of the people from SAF AQC or AFMC contracting types. But there's a digital contracting division that's being kind of stood up within AFMC to say, hey, how do we shift our contracting portfolio or contracting, ROEs to move forward in the space? And I will say on our team specifically, the one program manager we have, he's really a contracting officer by trade. He's actually across the hall from me here in this facility we're in, but he's at one point, just to kind of sort of brag on him, he was the most warranted contracting officer in the Air Force. He had OTAs. He did a lot of pathfinding for that. He was part of the AFWorks kickoff, and so we got pretty strong ties to kind of the CIBR activities, the AFWorks innovation networks. So I think as far as having a 12-person team, I think we've got decent experience on the team. It's definitely not me, but as far as having a formal contracting officer, got to have a budget first. I got to have some money.
But effectively, you got him that has the skills, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. All right. So before we take more questions from the public, we wanted to talk to you, Kyle. John. Sorry, about why why modeling and simulation matters so much, and why it's a must in most programs nowadays, and how can people start consuming it better, and what should they do to partner with you guys to start understanding better what the enterprise is thinking about?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll make one more plug for the Chief Modeling and Simulation Office, because in terms of actually the policy and implementation of that, they have more of the stick on that, but modeling and simulation kind of persists throughout digital transformation and the acquisition lifecycle. And really think about how we used to design systems. You had people in large rooms just scribbling away on paper, crunching numbers, slide rules, what have you. And we had evolved from that. Then we shifted to, okay, now I'm doing things in a computer, but I'm using still a lot of tools that are fairly manual, and I have to really have a lot of graybeard knowledge of what I am doing on my system, especially if fielded, in order to catch a lot of those types of errors. So if I'm using Excel, or I'm using, PDF drawings, tools to create those, it's still one-dimensional, and it becomes very challenging still to visualize the information and thereby digest it and make a decision on it. When you get into 3D models and breaking those 3D models into a full meshed thing that I can analyze with finite element analysis, and then I can take that and I can run it through thermal analysis, you start being able to understand not just what was on that flat drawing and the tests by which I can put my system through, but prior to ever seeing a physical asset, I can, to quote Dr. Roper, digitally fly before we buy. And that is so powerful because it allows us to catch our mistakes early. It allows us to iterate hundreds, if not thousands of times before we ever see that physical asset. And ultimately, by the time you do see that physical asset and the tests you are putting it through, they're to get information that I could not otherwise have got, or simply to validate what my digital models were telling me. And so I'm not just hanging my hat on what the physical tests have told me. I've said, all right, my models, my simulations have already told me that this is going to work. I am merely verifying the truth in that statement. And I think that the more we can get to that, the better. And as we have our physical assets, I'll just plug the concept of digital twin here, is that when I have assets in the field and I have a digital representation of that asset, and even more importantly, of each and every physical asset in the field, it allows me to, again, make better decisions about the system because I'm able to now track and simulate over time which of my parts are going to fail at which cadence, which frequency, and I can now understand far more deeply. So instead of just relying upon schedule-based maintenance, I can move to more of a truly condition-based maintenance, predictive-based maintenance approach. And that all comes down to intelligently using modeling and simulation.
Yeah.
Kyle, you have anything to add?
Pretty spot on. Kyle, anything else?
Yeah. So I think it opens the door to an interesting discussion on kind of, since our office is pretty acquisition and sustainment scoped, and how do we connect and integrate with other, communities, right? I talked about the OODA loop earlier, right? The whole wargaming, force design stuff, right? Is it's out of scope, but at the same time, it's like, the things when they decide what we need to buy, right? We got to have a very clean integration with like that community that does some of those M&S activities. So it opens the door to, it's very similar discussion when we talk about IT infrastructure, this kind of SAFC and what computers, what networks, what infrastructure do we have to have as an enterprise. It's very easy for a military department to always default to what does the warfighter need, and what's the operate, and that's obviously like number one priority is what does the warfighter need today, right? What's going to make sure their planes still fly. At the same time, in the acquisition, kind of the back end, we have to make sure that our IT infrastructure and the tools that we need to then go develop the capabilities that are going to fight tomorrow's fight have to be up to snuff as well, right? We got to have the right tools. We got to have the right level of IT infrastructure to meet our needs. So it opens the door, kind of all those other external or pseudo external communities that we've got to have a very strong integration with to make sure that digital transformation for the acquisition community is going to be successful. But that's probably the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Cal, for you, there's a question here from Sonia. Asking how will we move beyond the sunk cost bias, which I've seen again and again so many times. And people that don't know is when you spend more good money after bad money, or you have a tough time declaring something, that then go behind the barn and shoot it and move to something new or something else. So how do we address that in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's tough. I will say we're probably postured better than we have been because to me that's a cultural issue, right? That's how do we get our community to make the right decisions that make sense, regardless of whatever biases are out there. So I will say with Secretary Kendall's very open about in God we trust, everyone else bring data. Prove to me what decisions you're doing with data. It's fully in line with kind of the Dr. Roper bending the spoon vision about making decisions based on data. So we have I think a more consistent make decisions based on data vector from leadership than probably, or at least more vocal about it than we've ever had before. So I think that's useful. And I've also been pretty impressed, and it might just be the visibility I've had, but I think in my career I've experienced a few times when we've one story off the cuff when I was down at Eglin at a program office, a new PEO rolled in for weapons. There was this a weapon rack program we were working on, and it was kind of underperforming, under executing, but it was just that, right? We'd kind of been going on it so long that we were kind of committed. Let's keep extending the schedule, keep pumping a little more. Maybe we'll figure out our technical problems. And he rolled in and he said, no, it's been too long. Got it in the program, right? And to do that takes both, you got to have confidence in the data and decisions you're making, but you also got to be willing to follow it through with, it's much easier just to kind of extend a program a little bit, extend it a little bit. There's more bureaucracy around ending a program, right? Taking it to the acquisition executive, saying, nope, we're going to stop it for these reasons. So I think we have all the right messaging around to empowering our decision makers to follow through on the decisions that make sense. And so I'm optimistic. I think a big part of it is coming with the right data and then having the follow through to really commit to that decision. Yeah,
that's spot on. So someone was asking, you talked about before about the data, right? Getting access to the data. And Michael was asking, why is it about data? Data obviously is overwhelming. It must be transformed into information that's then transformed into knowledge that's then transformed into wisdom. How do you, I guess, is that what you meant when you say data? I guess it's kind of curated and well understood data points.
Yeah, well, I'll just take a stab at that. At least when I referred to data, that's what I meant. And I mean, data is the raw collection, the raw what people are generating, whether people or systems are generating, and it is hard to make decisions off of raw data. If I see a text file and it is 70 columns wide and a million lines long, and I'm like, this is our full data set. This is so rich. We've got it all. And someone says, okay, cool. Tell me when I need to replace that part. I'd be like, okay, where in that mess of data is something that I can actually make a decision with? And so you're absolutely right. When I meant data, I think digital transformation is understanding the types of things I need to do to take that raw data and turn it into something that I can digest, that a human being can digest and make a decision on, or to help establish systems that can aid in our decision-making process for us. Because obviously computers are far better at crunching through that than we are. But yeah, we got to be able to make those wise decisions and be willing to look at ourselves in the mirror and understand when we have hit that sunk cost wall or whether we can get past it. And I think, at least I would venture, that the DTO is not in a position to tell a program time to cut cord, but more helping just be honest, provide that feedback, provide those lessons learned, and help people understand. We may have bitten off more than we could chew, and we might need to cut X, Y, or Z activity out because it's just not giving us that return on investment, and it is better to just pull that trigger. So again, all comes down to taking that data and turning it into something we can use.
Yeah. And I guess someone was asking, in the Days No Spoon, Dr. Roper alluded to the evolution of the tech stack layers as technology materials, and one was called at the time MBSE1, and that person was asking if that vision is being pursued anywhere in the department. Obviously, the Chief Modeling and Simulation Office was created to do some of that, but maybe, I guess, Kyle, do you know if anything is going on when it comes to? I know Cloud One had was building kind of a digital engineering as a service stack on Cloud One. Is that kind of where MBSE1 is gonna be, or is, I mean, I know the names are all gone, but the concept of it?
Yeah, so the concept of it, I think, is still something we're definitely trying to make a reality. I'll say MBSE, model-based system engineering specifically, is probably one of the things that the campaign has been a little more vocal about. We're trying to figure out how we do that. And we've had a lot of programs that are pathfinding in this area, right? GBSD has been playing in the MBSE realm for a little bit, for a while. The Simulated Common Architecture Requirement System, SCARS, I think, is another one that's done a lot of good things. Resilient Embedded GPS INS system. So there's lots of systems out there that are starting to demo, like, hey, I can do this MBSE stuff, and here's the benefit. Here's what I can get out of it. So kind of documenting the when and where and how do I apply MBSE effectively within the confines of government acquisition. Because another thing that's interesting about government acquisition specifically, right, is we don't build the planes. We buy them, acquire them, review them, make sure they're up to snuff with the requirements that we build. So the way we do MBSE versus the way that a Lockheed or a Raytheon or a supplier does MBSE is going to be different, right? We're still at the end of the day going to be reviewers of the technical information rather than creating the entirety of the MBSE model for the aircraft or something. So that's one interesting nuance. But then to specifically answer that question, like the Air Force, we're partnered very well with the Hanscom Air Force Base folks who do a lot of our infrastructure acquisition with Cloud One. And so there's a digital engineering platform as a service we're trying to get built out and kind of be the cloud hosted sandbox for programs to kind of onboard, have access to these tools. It's not nearly as widespread, proliferated, or scaled as we would like it to be. But that's one of our priorities that we're trying to figure out how we can scale that and make it more accessible to programs to start figuring out how to use it.
Yeah, I remember helping the team at Hanscom create this one, a year and a half ago. So, all right. So Michael has a question here, probably for Cal. I don't know, but what is your relationship with Space Force CTIO's office and the Space Force Digital Engineering effort with General Raymond's digital vision?
Yep. So we're definitely connected with the CTIO. When we first stood up our office, we tried to lay in this. People love to make governance constructs. Who do I report to? Who do I take strategic direction from? And so we were kind of firm, and we don't want to create any new authorities, right? No new governance boards or anything like that. But we did establish here's who we take strategic vision from. Here's who we need to make sure we're connected to. And so again, with our acquisition sustainment scope, we kind of scoped it into the engineering or technical leadership across AFMC, the Air Force Material Command, Space Systems Command, kind of the acquisition group on the Space Force side, as well as the Pentagon staff for both acquisition executives. But then we also had kind of membership that we pointed out of who is the key offices we need to make sure we're connected to. We had groups within SAPCN. We had some of the various chiefs that we've already referenced, the SIMSO team, the chief architect, and so your office that you had departed from. We're still tagging up with the chief software office on a bi-weekly or monthly basis to make sure we're kind of plugged in with them as well. But the CTIO is definitely one of those organizations. So Dr. Costa is very forward-leaning, very great thinker in this realm. So we definitely take don't take that don't take advantage of that. We're appreciative of her leadership.
All right, awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about architecture. So I know that open architecture is a foundation of the digital trinity. I guess Cal, still on you for this one. Tell us a little bit about what's going on when it comes to architectures.
Yeah, absolutely. So architecture, I think, and this was kind of my core job when I was in the Pentagon. So this is kind of where I got a soft spot. This is one of my favorite areas. And it's another one of those terms where when you think about architecture, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So just to kind of level set, for our office, right, architecture is weapon system design, open architecture, modularity, rapid upgradability for weapon systems. So for the Air Force, I think, has been on a pretty good path on at least establishing a handful of open architecture standards, reference architectures, government reference architectures that help define, kind of guide and constrain the development of a weapon system architecture. And it kind of enables that modularity, builds it into the design. One of the things I think we haven't done a great job of yet, that we're working very closely with a lot of key organizations to help make happen. We don't have a great story right now on how to align all of the different open architecture efforts. So one of the kind of publicly releasable information, we have a kind of off the cuff number, over $500 million across the FIDEP for open architecture investments, right, which are very critical to enabling rapid upgradability, modularity down into the future, right? So critical investments that we're making, but every one of those investments comes from a different customer, a different end user, a different office is kind of developing and creating that open architecture standard. And in some cases, it's absolutely necessary, right? Because some of those are going to be an EW capability for an ACC customer, but they want to have the modularity to upgrade down the line. So they have this very specific thing with a very specific funding line with a very specific customer. that they're working on. At the same time, we have this other, maybe a radar initiative in a different organization. And so the Air Force has actually set up an open architecture management office, the OAMO, that we work very closely with to try to help kind of shepherd them all together, create a broader, at least avionics reference architecture that kind of maps out, hey, where do each of these fit? How do they connect together? So I think we've made a lot of great strides there, kind of getting the proper connections, authorities, to make sure that all of those kind of continue to develop in a way that's synergistic is one of the things we're putting a lot of effort towards, a lot of time towards. So we're working close with the OAMO, with the Chief Architect's office to try to kind of lay that strategy out, lay that approach out to figure out how that works.
Yeah, awesome. Very important stuff. And when you look at the breadth of the engagements that you are describing, I think that's where an office like yours is so important, right? Because it feels like sometimes we pay for the same things quite a few times. So that's something obviously to pay attention to. So, all right. So now we wanted to get a little bit of a deep dive on your 5. How do you call them? Priorities, strategic priorities. So can you I guess cover a little bit of that, and then John can give us a little bit of a deep dive on training and culture, because I know training and culture are two of the pillars here that you're focusing on as well.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the first things we did when we kind of officially stood up in June was we called them roadshows. We just kind of wanted to bounce around. Again, like we talked about earlier, right? The department had been talking about digital transformation for a long time. Lots of preconceived notions, lots of ongoing activities. We kind of wanted to take a step back and say, hey, let's go to Eglin Air Force Base, Hanscom Air Force Base, LA Air Force Base, Tinker, Warner Robins. Let's go to the kind of the acquisition bases and have conversations with people that are doing acquisition every day, that are in the trenches, doing development, doing tests, doing sustainment. And figure out, like, hey, okay, you've probably heard all this stuff we've been talking about for a couple of years. How does it resonate, right? What are you feeling? What are your pains? What are your struggles? What are your successes? And so through all of those, through a couple of workshops we hosted where we were trying to outreach kind of to the grassroots doers across the community rather than the kind of leadership focused teams, ideating what to get after. 5 things immediately bubbled up, and I'll say one of them, I'll steal a little bit of John's thunder. It all kind of comes down to culture, right? Most of them ended up funneling towards culture being the problem, that, if we fix the culture, we could fix the tools, or if we could fix the culture, we could fix that. But so I think we already talked a little bit about architecture on the last question. And so I'll dig a little bit into tools and standards and then kick it over to John. So for standards, right? Everything we do, we kind of talk about accelerating. How do we make things go faster? Standards apply in obviously a lot of different ways, right? You have the open architecture stuff. You have standards that relates to that. What kind of interfaces do I need predefined? What kind of architecture considerations do I need to have like kind of laid flat? So that's one element. We also have processes, right? How do I go get acquisition approval or certain certifications, airworthiness, cybersecurity? All of those are really standards based, right? And so there's kind of process standards. There's architecture, weapon system design kind of standards. So standards is kind of a broadly applied area that we're putting a lot of time and energy into, and have a lot of teams doing a lot of great work that we're connected to, trying to help shepherd along within the broader context. Tools is another one, especially when we did our road shows, right? That was probably the first thing we got asked by a lot of different organizations. We go in, we say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is what the vision is. And we kind of got told, yeah, that's great. I don't have tools. And when I, where's my enterprise sandbox? We're going to go log in and get these MBSE tools or these MNS tools that you're talking about. And then a lot of times they would say, and I know you don't have them yet. And so I went ahead and I tried to get access to this specific tool. And oh, by the way, the EPL, ATO process, the ability to actually get this thing loaded on my computer is so arduous that I've been trying for months. I don't have the tool yet. So those are some of the struggles that we've been hearing on the tool side. I think through the digital engineering platform as a service, through some of the enterprise investments, we're trying to get instantiated. That's probably the most, the hurdle that's like right in front of our face that we're trying to get after. So that's one of our priorities. I think we already talked a good bit about architecture. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to you, John, on training and culture.
Yeah. So Well, I only have to talk about training since you covered culture. So no, I'm just kidding. Training is an interesting one because I mean, when we say training, when we put it up here on this chart, we really mean a combination of both training and education, and we differentiate the two of those specifically, where education is more of the familiarity. I'm going to help educate you on what the DTO is doing. I'm going to help educate you on what MBSC is. I'm going to help educate you on what product lifecycle management is. But training would be more, I'm going to teach you how to use that tool, how to use that capability, right? And so I think that's an important distinction. So one, we're trying to help educate the workforce about what digital transformation is, how to get after it. And then training, we're trying to help figure out what are the types of trainings that we can provide to the enterprise with regards to these different digital engineering, digital transformation type capabilities to help different programs to better get after their different goals, their different wins that they're trying to pursue. And so that is, I mean, really trying to affect positive change across the enterprise with respect to training, so that if someone left one program, moved to another, the training they received is equally as applicable, minus the specifics about the given program, but because that will far more likely help to retain our folks. And as people move up the organizations, as people move laterally across organizations, that's going to help people to better retrain to different programs. And that really blends into culture, because a big part of culture is understanding the environment of that organization that you're going into. And really the way that Air Force Acquisitions works, every directorate, every program is its own cultural entity within the broader enterprise of the 5-center construct that the Air Force and Space Force have. Well, the Space Force not 5-center, but we've got, right, we've got the Nuclear Weapons Center, we've got the Lifecycle Management Center, we've got the Research Lab. These are centers within the AFMC, and so you have programs that have their own culture, which broadens into the culture of a center, which broadens into the culture of the overall acquisition enterprise, and then into the overall Air Force and Space Force. And so trying to figure out, how do we capture that thread between them all, and how do we positively affect that change, because people are going to be resistant. The biggest part of the transformational part of this all is the fact that it is a cultural transformation, and it is going to be hard, and it is going to be uncomfortable. And so how do we, one, help people to drink the Kool-Aid, for lack of a better phrase, but also how do we enable those who have already drank it, those that are already the champions of these efforts, to be able to affect change locally at the grassroots, because we often see that that is the best way to go about it. We've got a terrific partner that we're working on for culture in the Gaping Void Design Group. And ultimately, I mean, it is just one of the 5, but it is the most cross-cutting across the 5, which is why Kyle had to mention it elsewhere. And so that, I would say, is one of the biggest areas that the DTO is trying to affect in the synergy across the enterprise, is from that cultural perspective.
Yeah, and if I could pull the thread a little more, one of the I was kind of watching the chat. Andrew McMullen kind of told the story of, you know, he used to get kind of queried on stuff, and he would give his opinion. I think he kind of reprimanded the back door at the frozen middle, right? So I mentioned the road shows we did earlier, and so and I'm gonna tell the story because it's probably the most rewarding kind of thing that I've got to do so far in this job. We had gone through, gathered all these. So we both went in with kind of, hey, these are the things we want to talk about. Let's get the formal. What's your program doing? What's your position? What are what are your struggles? And then almost every meeting we've ever had with any acquisition programs, we kind of did a break, very non-attribution okay, we're not going to tell anybody what you're, anything beyond this point, we're not going to share. We're not going to attribute to you. Tell us your struggles, your pains, what's your opinions, your thoughts, your feelings. Really, like, let's really just open, come on, and let's have a conversation about stuff. And so we started collecting these stories of, a lot of them were, things like, hey, I tried to get this tool, this specific organization blocked me from it, and I couldn't do my job. And they're like, I don't want anyone to know that because I got to keep working with that organization. But so I don't want to try to fight that fight today. I got to maintain that relationship, keep going. But that's the kind of struggles they're fighting. And so we gathered probably a dozen of those kind of stories. And then Gaping Void Design Group that John mentioned created what they call semiotics. And if you go like study what a meme is, right, there's a whole rabbit trail of kind of psychology behind memes as a unit of transfer with impactful images and messages that attach to it. And so they would create these semiotics that would kind of help tell a story. And then so we gathered all these stories, we gathered these semiotics, and we actually went and briefed General Bunch, Ms. Costello, and the acquisition leadership, and said, hey, we're not going to attribute who said these stories, but you should be aware, as we talk digital transformation, digital engineering, digital acquisition, these are some of the struggles that programs are seeing, some of the individuals at kind of the practitioner worker bee level are seeing. And we were able to tell these stories, and some of them were positive, and some of them were very like, hey, we talk about digital transformation, and then we have these people that just spend all day long grinding through IT processes, trying to get a tool on their desktop. And so we were able to kind of tell those stories in a very non-attribution way, so that Andrew's story wouldn't have we wouldn't have got his wrist slapped, because we could kind of take that and bubble it up all the way to the top and say, this is something you need to know as a leader. And we've been able as kind of a middleman. That I think we built that trust with a lot of groups to help tell some of those stories that need to get told.
Yeah, Nick, I think software and IT. I mean, much better than I do. But I mean, it is not necessarily fast, and it is not necessarily easy, and it is not necessarily cheap, right? And so I think part of that education and cultural piece too is just helping people at all levels understand both the benefits, the challenges, the lessons learned, and help people not look at it through rose-colored glasses, right? Help people understand, if you're going to do this, it's going to give you some ROI, but here's what it's going to take to get there. Here's how long it might take. Here's the effort it's going to take, and just help be realistic. Because I would say everyone in our DTO team is an optimist, but we also got to make sure that we are not going down a road of false promises either.
Yeah, no doubt. That's spot on. So we have quite a few questions. So I'll let you decide who picks what question, but I'm going to bring up on the screen. Can you comment on LinkedIn MBSE models across multiple program offices of various fidelity for system of system projects?
Yeah, so I'll take a hack first. I think one of the things that's a struggle, if you kind of even broader than just the Air Force, right? There's a whole set of tools that can do MBSE modeling, right? System based modeling, and so there's the struggle of, okay, if I get one program that's doing something in Cameo Systems Modeler and another one is doing it in or whatever. Cameo, I know Cameo just got bought, or not too recently, but got bought out as a new name. But if someone's using the Cameo type tool, someone's using Enterprise Architect, someone's using Rhapsody. How do those models connect and kind of integrate together? I know there's groups out there that do that. So that's one struggle. I will say one of the things that I think is going to be very pathfinding for that exact issue is the Advanced Model Management System. So it transitioned from the Chief Architect Office to the Rapid Capability Office. They've got a working group that they're going to start digging into how do we apply digital engineering across that kind of suite of capabilities that fits within that umbrella. So I think that's something we're still learning, and we're going to get a lot of hopefully a lot of lessons learned and pathfinding out of the ABMS team.
Yeah, very good, very good. Someone was asking also on Twitter, what is you talk about tools, obviously enterprise, and we talk about Hanscom and the work they're doing to bring some of these tools, and it's just not enough. Yeah, you were talking about obviously it's a massive enabler where you talk about the complexity to bring some of these tools on airmen's desktops. Is that one of the top priority? I guess how do we solve that? Because if you don't get the tools, there's just no nothing can even be done, right?
Yeah. Kyle mentioned the Hanscom team earlier, and they've got a lot of really great folks trying to tackle, Cloud One, digital engineering platform as a service. We've got a lot of these different pocket efforts trying to enable that just initial stand up. Part of the challenge, just in the way that programs budget themselves, is right a POM process that looks multiple years into the future. And you get a leader that comes and says, I heard about this digital transformation thing and it sounds great. Let's do it now. What is it going to take? And in order to try to please the boss, who in many cases in our line of work is only there for a couple of years, you end up with we're trying to do things fast. But again, like I said earlier, this is not necessarily fast or cheap. And so if I don't have enough funding with which to move as fast, I must go more of a crawl, walk, run approach. And unfortunately, the money doesn't tend to come in that upfront piece. The infrastructure, the initial batch of licenses, a lot of that often becomes the most expensive and challenging and demanding part of the overall transformation. And so that's just one of the challenges we have already seen, but also one of the things that we're trying to get after to enable programs to have a lower barrier to entry simply by virtue of the fact that they have been unable to establish the base foundational infrastructure to get after some of these. So that is absolutely something we're getting after.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I'll pull the thread a little more just because I did this. The palming process has been one of my soapboxes recently. So I kind of joked when I was talking to some of the PPBE, like the A58 kind of community, saying as we were developing different palm options for both this year and last year, I was like, the dollars that are being executed today, I was supposed to have palmed for in 2019. What we were talking about in 2019, it was like digital was just becoming like one of the talking points for the Air Force. So we weren't giving this direction to acquisition programs that were doing some of the some of their palming, right? And so one of the biggest struggles right now is definitely the enterprise funding. There's no mechanism to get quick funding right now to do a lot of this kind of stuff. So most of the current construct where we're trying to supplement with the random pocket change we can find here and there, but it's mostly customer funded. And so the big programs with larger budgets are able to get out ahead of it and start making an impact. With some of the vast majority of our not ACAP and large budget programs are kind of in the trying to limp along, figure out how to apply it for them today. And then so I think we're taking a good approach with the digital engineering platform as a service to try to say, hey, eventually this will get scaled, get enough people onboarded, get enough funding down. As we slowly kind of grow it out, it'll become much more wide scale. But the palming process inevitably makes it take time.
Yeah, no doubt. So Corey here had the question about how you coordinate also with the other services, and in this case, he was talking about PO MLB from the Navy and some of their model-based project support MBPS work.
So I know we've been very closely connected in the past with the system engineering transformation team within the Navy, the SET, and so I'm pretty sure they'd be tracking that specific project with that specific PEO in the Navy. I'm not tracking very well, John. I don't know from the sustainment side, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, that specific organization I'm not as familiar with, but
if you can follow up and kind of make a
pockets,
connection, if you can make a connection with us and them, we could pull on the right kind of product support experts on our side. It'd be a great connection for us to make.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the show, is finding out stuff we don't know about. So people don't realize that most of the time we don't know all the teams that are doing very similar things in the building. So all right, so quite a few more questions. Here we go. John was asking, lots of 3D models have been created by different vendors and program offices. Do you see a need for the DoD to have a model library that vendors and program offices can access and reuse?
So, do I see a need? Yeah, I think we'll definitely get there eventually. I think there's a lot of discussion again back to kind of the different tools that are out there. it takes a lot before you before you pick a tool, right? That's going to be the enterprise tool, the solution that we're going to use. So I don't think we're anywhere near, if ever, right? I don't think we'll get to the point where we can say, hey, this version of this MBSE tool is the one we're going to do, or same with CAD, and largely because we're not the biggest user of those tools, and so we're kind of again, back to the major primes, the major people, actually the groups doing the development of these weapon systems are the prime users, and so they're the ones going to steer kind of the tool vendor offerings that are out there. So, but definitely a need, and I think we're the right conversations are happening. It's a matter of getting the right enough experimentation across the programs with different MBSE tools, different CAD tools, and to start to create those libraries, those catalogs.
I will caveat, though. I mean, it sounded like more. It didn't. You kind of answered based on 3D tools. I didn't necessarily mention that, so I don't know if the question was more the tools or the models themselves. And I don't imagine that unless a vendor has a contract that with the DoD that there would ever be access to such a library, but I think an internal library could absolutely happen.
Right. Yeah, we were pushing for that 2 years ago, so now you have to make it happen, right? So
we'll get there.
All right. So next question is from Sonia. Also, maybe some new people you want to talk to if you don't know about those guys. But
yeah, that'd be great. I'm going to follow up with you after, Sonia.
Yeah, the FAMs are drafting a reference architecture for MNS focused on training, but obviously applicable to others. Would you want to talk to them? And I guess the answer is yes, and you'll follow up.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, cool. So let's see. So many questions. You guys are really attracting a lot of questions. So, all right. FRL is one of the founding members of the Digital Twin Consortium, but they don't believe you're a member. Are you following their effort and providing insight on what you have had in terms of challenges and help solve?
Yeah, so one of the other guys on our team, Dr. Steve Turek, is our tech advisor. So I think he's plugged into that exact effort. If that name doesn't ring a bell, then definitely follow. If that name rings a bell, and you said, "Yep, okay, you guys are tracking." He's a guy on our team that's been following those efforts, as well as others going on in FRL. So I think we're plugged in and tracking.
Yep.
But if that doesn't ring a bell, follow up.
All right, awesome. Gosh, I'm telling you, you don't want to get strep throat. That's not fun. All right. So a question here, and I don't know what the acronym means. So VVNA. So maybe you know, but that's not my expertise. And I guess he was asking what kind of VVNA documentation are you planning on adopting?
Yeah, so verification, validation, and accreditation. I would deflect to the Chief M&S team, officer team, and so if you want to follow up with me after, I can connect you with that group. They're the more authoritative voice on it.
Do you feel like is the plan to have like one main tool, or pick a few, or what's kind of the vision there?
I think yeah, go ahead, John. You got it.
No, I think the more the merrier. I think it continues to challenge people if we run the risk of resting on our laurels if we do nothing but accept a specific tool and don't allow for competitors to enter that space over time. So I think we'll get to more of a scenario that is not a shrinking of the number of tools, but rather an acknowledgement by the vendors that integration between each other is more and more important, and so there is interoperability between the tools. I think that is the more likely path.
Yeah, and we also maybe don't want too many, right? Because then I guess the issue is compatibility, and creating some type of repository would make it probably harder for people to reuse things. So I think it's good to have a few, but probably not too many. But
yeah, enterprise implementations get a lot easier when you're buying a large volume for a large amount of people.
Yep.
So it's a balance of that.
Right. All right. Let's see. Okay, so Alex was asking, John, you were talking about text files, and I know you were just giving an example when you gave that example, but Are you guys already kind of working with the chief data officer and the chief architect of the Air Force to start consuming some of the data coming from the data lake and data fabric we got? Or
Yeah, so very much plugged in with the chief data office, SAF CO. For those on the call who haven't heard, Air Force is kind of pursuing a big 6 data fabrics. And so I don't want to mess up the acronyms by trying to spell them out all here. But I mean, everything from a data fabric for cyber, a data fabric for intel, a data fabric for positional and sensor data, a data fabric for logistics and maintenance data, and then a few others that are kind of multi-capable systems. So absolutely plugged in, but the DTO was not intended to be the owner or driver of any of the data fabrics themselves. So helping programs understand, hey, you're dealing with this type of data, you should consider these systems to go plug into. Let me help you connect into those systems, connect with those people. And we're also very plugged in with the logistics IT organization that is kind of a joint effort between AFMC and half A4 offices. And those efforts are also multifaceted, setting up a few different systems, and the logistics system captured in the Big 6 is also part of that logistics IT effort. And PLM, product lifecycle management, is a component of the log IT strategy. So we're absolutely very, very closely integrated with those different efforts. Over.
Right, and PLM specifically, I say there is a product lifecycle management capability support office, PLM CSO, that the Air Force, specifically the Air Force side rather than the DAF, but that has kicked off, and they're actively onboarding programs into the Siemens Team Center Air Force PLM environment. So there's that's another area that, again, they're the authoritative voice on that, but that's an area we're making a lot of tangible, kind of real progress.
all right, let's see. That LinkedIn user, I don't have the picture, so we'll be interested to know if the speakers have seen the NIST evaluation of MBSC cyber physical systems digital twin. It seems there was little follow through and little uptake by industry. The opposite has been true in Europe, where automotive and aerospace are heavily invested in virtual system simulation, MBSC. I don't know if you guys have seen, but companies like Wind River were bought by a car manufacturer. So clearly, I think particularly the automotive industry is spending quite a bit of money when it comes to RTOS and digital twinning and Kubernetes and containers and all that kind of stuff too. So.
Yeah, I'm not familiar specifically with the NIST evaluation system or tool that he's referencing, but I will say I've seen a lot more, specifically on the European side, automotive industry specifically, kind of a lot more kind of forward-leaning things. And I'll do one more story because, again, I like stories. But Formula One, I think, is one of those areas that they're doing extremely complex designs of automotive systems and very forward-leaning, and data is everything there, right? There's very limited on how much test time they get on the track, how much the timeline they have to do to develop their next iteration of a new Formula One race car. And it just kicked off last weekend, and my March Madness bracket is already trashed. So I shifted over full sports fan focus over to Formula One anyway. But the McLaren team actually really early on in our Air Force efforts came and talked to us and said, "Hey, this is what we did. This is what it means to us." And some of the stories that, again, going back to culture, right? There was lots of stories of I would watch one day, and they would there was a time when specifically for McLaren, Lando Norris was one of the drivers. They said, "Hey, I'm going to change out this power unit the day before the race, because my M&S system said it would be better, right? The data says it's better. To do that, I'm going to take a five position drop at the pole, but I'm going to do that anyway, right?" And I kind of thought of that, if I put my head in the seat of a program manager, the acquisition system that we abide by, how easy it would be to say, "Hey, I'm going to take this step, 5-month slip to make me better 5 years from now," right? Is kind of the thing I put in my head, and it was just like, that would never happen, right? You just can't do that. But when the data is there, and you can make that decision based on that data, it's real, right? And they did it, and I was like, that's one of the areas we struggle with, that cultural kind of decision making.
Yeah, I've done it at Platform One a few times, maybe not 5 months, but So they have done it when we had so much tech debt that it was gonna slow us down, and we had to take a breath and fix it first. All right, so Nicholas, I guess, or Nicola, I don't know, has a question here when it comes to do you have a good example of roadmap of an ideal development program and where different types of digital tools and standards might apply? So I guess in an ideal world that doesn't exist, I guess, but what would you recommend?
So John,
Yeah.
I'll take the first one and then toss it over to you because I know you probably had even better examples, and I'm going to have to drop off after this one. But so one of the great examples I think is out there is the B52. So there's one of the things the campaign put in place early on was a digital maturity assessment process. We created this kind of framework to say, hey, when you go think about it, here's things you can think about. Specifically your IT infrastructure. What tools and models do you think you might need or know you need? What's your contract kind of structure look like? And it would walk you through, here's all the things you should think about and grade yourself, right? And then so the B52 program specifically said, okay, I'm not very digital, right? I have a 60-year-old platform with a lot of paper drawings of stuff that I got to go dig through my file cabinet to find. And so they gave a very honest assessment of this is where we are. They put a kind of a future picture of where do I want to be? And they use that entire framework to kind of map out, okay, here's the 10, 20, 30 things I need to do from here to there. And mapped it to investments, mapped it to that digital maturity assessment process, and laid it all out in one coherent story. That was one of the, a legacy system that's doing, very methodical approach to figure out how they need to go. But John, I'll kick it over to you, and then I'll just say I got to roll. But I really appreciate the time. If there's any other questions from anyone else in the chat for me specifically, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or get in touch. I'm happy to talk.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kyle. No, I the only other thing I was going to mention on that question was that there's the digital campaign part of that effort is aiding in the overall, like the standards and the contract language that we're trying to do to put on contract. And I think part of that talks to how to work with industry, work with companies to develop these programs. To Kyle's point, there's no such thing as a true ideal. But I think when I think through examples that I'm familiar with, the more valuable things that come to mind are all of the examples of the things that did not work and the way that I should not do something, and using that to guide how I should do something in the future. So, hey, I watched programs A, B, and C try to do something, and C kind of worked, and B and A did not work at all. So we'll take that positive lesson learned. We'll take those negative lessons learned, and I think that'll help steer us better. So I don't know that I could paint or promise an ideal program, but we're working towards it. And I think as we get further along, the DTO is going to be far more likely to do some industry AMAs to just share out some of that information so that programs, both internal and industry partners, are able to better work together.
Yeah, in fact, the last question we got, John, for you is from Michael asking, what can people do to augment your effort? So I think that's going to be a good last question. And if you have parting comments, and I'll share with the group what are the next shows and who are they going to be the next guests after you. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think there's a lot of things. Keep doing. I mean, for those that are in industry, keep doing all the great things you're doing already. We've seen a lot of just really impressive capabilities, a lot of really impressive tools. If you're a small business, please come into the AFWorks small business ecosystem. Pursue those SIBRs, phase 1, 2, and 3. TAC-FIs and strat-FIs. I mean, there's money to be had there. There's programs interested. We talked earlier about how hard it is for programs to really get going until we finally get these enterprise IT capabilities in place to just result in an infrastructure that can allow programs to build it from the ground up. But until we get to that point, a lot of programs rely upon SIBRs to effectively just kickstart their transition. And so the better that programs can pursue those and help programs understand, hey, I understand that you are just now getting started with this, and I can help you do that by taking these steps. We'll bring the people, you bring the data, and we will help you start your transition. I think that is one of the most tangible ways, but more than anything, just keeping in touch with the DTO, helping us understand, hey, I have this new capability and it is like ready for prime time right now, or we're in development and we just need someone to help sponsor us. And if it's a capability that we haven't seen, then potentially, even if we can't put money up against it, we can at least be that voice, that customer that can help get you closer to a phase 2 or 3. I cannot promise any of that, but I want to just encourage industry to keep working. And for those that are internal to the government, I mean, please, if your organization, your office is not already engaged, please connect with us on our website. Please connect with me and Kyle. We want to make sure that we are all plugged in, because the better I think that we are able to synergize our efforts with one another, the better we're going to be. I'm enjoying a great book called The Silo Effect right now, and I can tell you it is real, and we are trying everything we can to break down those silos, because I think we're better together.
Well, no doubt. With that, I wanted to thank you and Kyle for joining us for this great episode of In the Nick of Time. Next Tuesday, we're going to get someone pretty awesome. Gerald John Olsen, who is not only the first Air Force and Space Force Chief Data and AI Officer, but he's also the mobilization assistant to the Chief of Space Operations. And because he's kind of another achiever, he's also the Space Force lead for JADC2 and ABMS. And also on the side, he flies as an Airborne Emergency Action Officer aboard the Looking Glass Airborne Nuclear Command Post. So that's quite a lot of exciting things. You can come and ask John next week, 1 p.m. We're going to get only 1 hour with him, so make sure you bring your questions because that's going to go quick, and he's an awesome dude, and you want to be able to get as much from him as you can. I have my few questions already lined up, obviously, but I'm sure you guys all have also your own questions. So join us for next week, and then you'll see we have pretty amazing guests lined up for April. So that's exciting as well. You'll see quite a few people that are pretty awesome. So I'm very excited about this. If you have people you want to recommend for the show, please shoot us an email or reach out to me on LinkedIn to propose a name of someone that has a pretty unique and cool background to join on the show. And again, if you want to register for the show, go in the nickoftime.tv so you can subscribe and get email notifications for the show. So meanwhile, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you next week, guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.